Today, we're looking at an absolute landmark case that literally changed how the justice system evaluates scientific evidence. We're talking about People v. Yatar, specifically GR No. 150224, which was decided back on May 19, 2004. This one is fascinating. It's this incredible collision of a gritty true crime investigation, cutting-edge biology, and some really high-level constitutional law. So we're not just looking at what happened, we're exploring exactly how the courts bridge that huge gap between human suspicion and absolute scientific truth. But before we get into the crime itself, we kind of have to understand the immense burden placed on our courts. Imagine you're a judge. To take away a person's freedom, or in this case their life, the law requires what they call absolute moral certainty. It's not enough to just be pretty sure. You need a degree of certainty that satisfies both your reason and your conscience. It's an incredibly heavy weight. You have to find an undeniable truth before you convict. So keep that unbelievably high standard in the back of your mind as we go through this evidence. Okay, here's our roadmap for this explainer. 1. A tragic morning in Kalinga. 2. The chain of circumstances. 3. The DNA plus value. 4. The constitutional defense. And finally, 5. Moral certainty and justice. Let's get right into it. Section 1. A tragic morning in Kalinga. Let's set the somber scene where this all starts. Just look at this timeline for June 30th, 1998. Notice how unbelievably tight this window of opportunity was. At 8:30 in the morning, 17-year-old Kathylyn Uba hands a letter from her aunt over to her aunt's estranged husband, a man named Joel Yatar. By 9 a.m., Kathylyn's relatives had all headed out to their farm, which means she is now completely alone in the house. Fast forward just a few hours to 12:30 and 1 p.m., witnesses actually spot Joel Yatar acting super strangely right near the house, and he's wearing this noticeably dirty white shirt. And what happened during that tiny, narrow window of time was just horrifying. The grim discovery of this young victim obviously launched a massive police investigation immediately. Kathylyn was found murdered on the second floor of her grandmother's house, and whoever did it had actually tied the door leading upstairs shut with a piece of rope. Because of that timeline we just looked at, the authorities quickly zeroed right in on Joel Yatar. Which brings us to Section 2, the chain of circumstances. Let's look at the case the prosecution actually built. So the court ended up documenting 13 separate circumstantial facts, which I've grouped here to make it a bit easier to digest. First off, motive and access. Yatar lived really close by. He actually used to live in that exact house. And as an older relative by marriage, he had moral ascendancy over Kathylyn. Second, his strange behavior. He basically fled the scene when relatives approached. And later, get this, he literally escaped from police detention. And as we know in the eyes of the law, flight is usually a massive red flag for guilt. Finally, the physical scene evidence. Remember that dirty white shirt he was spotted in? It tested positive for blood. And tragically, sperm was also recovered during the victim's autopsy. Now, looking at all that, it seems like a slam dunk, right? It's an absolute mountain of circumstantial evidence. But the court has to ask a vital question. Does all this automatically provide the plus value needed for a conviction? Because to pass legal relevancy, evidence needs that plus value. Think of it like a giant anchor. It's the thing that prevents a court from jumping to hasty conclusions based just on prejudice or bad vibes. It has to form an unbroken chain that links the accused to the crime without a shadow of a doubt. So, did they find that anchor? Let's check out Section 3, the DNA plus value, where the science enters the courtroom. Now, this is absolutely crucial. It perfectly illustrates how Philippine courts handle brand new science. The court applied what's known as the Daubert test, basically officially recognizing that DNA testing, specifically PCR testing and STR analysis, was a highly reliable tool. Keep in mind, back in the early 2000s in the Philippines, this was incredibly pioneering stuff. They affirmed that creating a unique genetic profile from biological samples isn't just some wild guesswork. It's solidly based on the valid, objective principles of molecular biology. And this leads to a seriously traumatic twist. On March 30, 2000, Joel Yatar actually provides his own blood sample. And he does it right there in open court, literally in front of the judge with his lawyers watching. This was a super bold move because it meant his blood would be directly compared against the forensic slides from the crime scene. Talk about a make-or-break moment. But hey, the defense wasn't just throwing in the towel. Let's look at Section 4, the constitutional defense. Staring down the barrel of modern science, the defense got really creative. They actually argued that using this DNA test violated his constitutional rights. They asked, is DNA testing an unconstitutional ex post facto law?
Basically, they tried to find a clever loophole. They were arguing that because the science was new, applying it retroactively somehow changed the legal consequences of the crime after the fact. They wanted to block the scientific evidence entirely.
Well, the Supreme Court completely dismantled that argument, and they did it by drawing a really sharp line between a question of law and a question of fact. See, an ex post facto law means you're retroactively changing the actual penal laws or the punishments. But DNA profiling, that doesn't change the law at all. It's just a tool used to determine the facts of the case. It's a procedure for weighing evidence, not some brand new law designed to punish him.
The defense also tried another angle. They argued that taking Yatar's blood violated his right against self-incrimination. But the court firmly shut this down too. And this is super important for all of us to understand. The right against self-incrimination is meant to stop you from being forced to verbally testify against yourself. It's about testimonial compulsion. It absolutely does not prevent the state from physically extracting biological evidence, like taking a blood sample or rolling your fingerprints. Even if you have the right to remain silent, your physical body can still be used as evidence.
All right, Section 5, moral certainty and justice. The defenses are rejected, and the science meets the law. This is the undeniable climax of the whole mystery. The DNA profile from the biological evidence left at the crime scene yielded a 100% identical match to the blood sample given by Joel Yatar. Just one identical match. But that single, unarguable scientific fact provided the ultimate plus value the court was looking for. It took those 13 different circumstantial facts and just locked them all together with an unbreakable seal. And because of that unbroken chain, now completely anchored by the DNA match, the Supreme Court had zero doubts left. They achieved that absolute moral certainty we talked about at the beginning. They firmly affirmed the conviction for the special complex crime of rape with homicide, upheld the death penalty for Joel Yatar, and modified the damages awarded to Kathylyn's grieving family. The court actually summarized their ruling beautifully. They noted that circumstantial evidence isn't inherently weak, as long as there is enough of it and it connects properly. The circumstances taken together should be of a conclusive nature, leading to a satisfactory conclusion that the accused, and literally no one else, committed the offense. They essentially wove together traditional boots-on-the-ground police work with cutting-edge biology to find the truth. So the Yatar case remains a massive landmark because it fully cemented DNA as a reliable, constitutional tool for finding the truth in the Philippines. It's a real game changer. And it kind of leaves you wondering, right, as forensic science just keeps evolving at this breakneck pace, how many other cold cases or seemingly perfect crimes are going to be unraveled by the tiny, microscopic truths left behind? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you next time.